Whoa. In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
When we last left Wonky Cottage, it was the end of June. The beds were planted, things were growing, and we were finally starting to see some real progress. And then it rained, and rained, and rained some more. For almost 3 solid weeks, Saskatchewan apparently forgot where it had put the off switch. And at first, this was wonderful. The garden was getting watered for free, everything was lush and green, and I didn't have to drag a hose around every evening. By about week 2, however, we were beginning to wonder if perhaps we'd accidentally purchased waterfront property. And by week 3, well, Foreman Harley was reviewing our emergency transportation options. Eventually, though, the rain stopped, the clouds disappeared, the sun came out. And for approximately 12 minutes, we were thrilled. Because Saskatchewan, having spent 3 weeks trying to drown the garden, immediately changed tactics and decided to cook it instead. For the next 3 weeks, temperatures regularly climbed into the mid to upper 30s Celsius, at which point Foreman Harley officially declared working conditions unacceptable. So for the better part of 6 weeks, not very much gardening actually happened at Wonky Cottage. But here's the funny thing. While we weren't doing much gardening, the garden was doing plenty all by itself. Since this was where we left off, this seems like the obvious place to start. And apparently the coffee bed had absolutely no complaints about 3 weeks of rain followed by 3 weeks of heat. The little plants we put in only a few weeks earlier stopped looking like individual plants and started looking like an actual garden. Around the corner, this little connecting bed did exactly what I wanted it to do. Instead of the coffee bed just stopping at the end of the house, the planting now carries right around the corner toward Fern Gully. The sunflowers gave us some height, the bird bath became the little focal point in the middle, and suddenly these separate beds started to feel like one garden. The bird bath itself turned out to be a little more high maintenance than expected. Wonky Cottage is rarely completely still, and on breezy days the fountain would happily spray half its water anywhere except back into the bowl, so there was quite a bit of refilling. But once the heat arrived, I stopped complaining about it, because apparently we'd installed the neighborhood watering hole. Birds used it, of course, but so did the squirrels, rabbits, and even the gray partridge. And when temperatures were pushing into the high 30s, I was very glad there was a reliable source of water sitting here for anything that needed it. This is what Fern Gully looked like when we started. Bare soil, scattered plants, a few survivors, and a whole lot of potential. Then came the fern rescue. The peonies settled in, the hostas took hold, and apparently 3 weeks of rain was exactly what this bed had been waiting for. By the end of July, it had gone from one of the roughest looking parts of the garden to one of the most successful. Up on the poop deck, we did a little remaking of a different kind. At the end of June, it was functioning mostly as somewhere to put things while we worked out what to do with them. A rug, some lights, a few hanging baskets, and a bit of clearing later, and suddenly it felt less like garden storage and more like an actual outdoor room. And tucked into one of the pots was one of our sunflowers, which spent most of July making me wonder whether it intended to do anything useful at all. Apparently, It did. From the poop deck, we come back down to planter row. And honestly, I don't think this could have turned out much better. What started as a collection of containers became one of the prettiest parts of the whole front yard. The coleus was spectacular, the lobelia kept spilling and flowering, the sweet potato vine tied everything together, and the whole row ended up looking lush, full, and far more expensive than it actually was. The fountain bed was another one I really wanted to come back and look at, because this is where we started. It wasn't exactly terrible, it just wasn't doing very much. Then in June, we added the fountain, cleared out the old planting, and filled the bed with dahlias, celosia, and dusty miller. And this is where all that rain really started earning its keep. Over the next few weeks, those little individual plants began filling in the gaps, the dahlias started blooming, the celosia added those deep red spikes, and the dusty miller gave the whole thing that silvery edge I was hoping for. Best of all, the fountain stayed the center of it all. By the end of July, this wasn't really an empty bed with a fountain sitting in it anymore. It was starting to look like the garden I had pictured in my head. Right beside the fountain bed is one of the smallest little spaces in the whole front yard, but it ended up being one of my favorites. This is what I keep calling the jungle ruin. Unlike the fountain bed, which is all sunshine and bright color, this little corner is much more about shade, texture, and contrast. The lobelia absolutely loved it here, spilling over the stone with that incredible blue, and the lamium brightened everything up with those silvery leaves. It didn't need to be big or loud. It just needed to feel tucked in, a little bit hidden, and a little bit magical. And by the time the rain and heat had done their work, that is exactly what it became. It's one of those spots that makes you stop and look twice, and I think every garden needs a few places like that. And with the front garden pretty much caught up, it was time to head through the gate. Because while all this had been quietly growing out front, the backyard was about to change completely. For years, this part of Wonky Cottage had been mostly a collection of things I meant to deal with eventually. Overgrown beds, shrubs that had become walls, fence lines disappearing under vines, a lawn that was doing a fairly convincing impression of prairie, and somewhere underneath all of it, apparently, was a very large backyard. I started in the backyard with one fairly simple goal: reclaim the clematis bed. Once I cleared away the weeds and years of accumulated chaos, I could actually see the bed again, and almost immediately the clematis rewarded us for the effort. I'm choosing to take that as a thank you. And then, quite seriously, the very next thing that happened was this. Once the tree came down, the entire backyard changed. It wasn't that we just removed a tree. We've removed the thing that had been visually dividing the yard, shading huge sections of it, and hiding how much space we actually had back here, and what kind of shape it was in. And the shape it revealed was bad. It was out of control, unloved, and honestly, how did this even happen? It was time to get serious. One little green bin wasn't going to do this. We rented a dumpster. Once the dumpster arrived, I finally got smart and stopped trying to look at the backyard as one enormous problem. Instead, I took it one bed at a time. First up was the cherry bed. Before, you could barely tell where the cherries ended and everything else began. A serious cutback, a lot of weeding, and a frankly unreasonable amount of material into the dumpster later, there was actually a bed under there. The back corner looked worse than it really was. Most of the problem was smaller weeds, volunteer growth, and years of old debris collecting along the fence line. Once I started pulling it out, it cleaned up surprisingly quickly, which was encouraging because there were still several considerably less cooperative areas waiting for us. Somewhere along the way, I finally found a rhythm. Stop looking at the whole backyard, pick one area, define it, purge it, move on to the next one. And then we reached the hosta bed, and this one mattered for a completely different reason. The house next door was about to be lifted, and the contractors needed access along this side of the property. So anything we wanted to keep had to move now. We dug out the last of the hosta, cut the spirea down, cleared the root, and by the end of the day, this entire strip was ready. It also turned out to be the last day, for a while, that the backyard was entirely ours. And this is why that hosta bed had to be done when it did. The next door foundation project arrived, the temporary fencing went up, and a big chunk of the side yard officially became a construction zone. Which meant that, for us, the 2026 planting season had pretty much reached its natural end. There were still things I could have planted. There are always things I could plant. But at this point, the work had changed. It isn't finished, not even close. But it was never supposed to be finished in 1 year. 2026 was about getting started, and I think we did that. So for now, the planting season is done. Next up, prepping for 2027.